this is how the panel comes to you. So if you've gone for one of our Quillow panels, and there's a variety of these available. This one's the penguins one for obviously Christmas, and they're all made up in a very similar idea. So you'll have your panel with all your pieces, but before we have a look at those pieces, you will find that the centre section here is made up of your instructions. So you've got your instructions. You've also got an illustration there to show you how your quilt will look from the front and also from the back as well. We've made things really easy for you because what we've actually done is added the frame that mimics the sashing that you might usually add to a quilt panel. So we're keeping it nice and simple for speedy sews if you are an experienced sewer or quilter, but getting you may be creating with something that looks more complex than it is, so really good for novice sewers as well. You'll feel as if you've achieved something quite lovely. So what have you got on your panel? Well, you've got your large panel, which is going to sit in the front of your piece. You will also have a second panel, and this will appear on the back. It's kind of going to be a pocket that you'll turn everything into, so kind of gives you an idea of what the back of your quilt will, your Quillow will look like. You've also got the pieces that are going to sit in the corners. So those are what we would normally call cornerstones, and again they've got that frame already attached to them. You've also got your side pieces. So these are the pieces that will frame your centerpiece. So you can see with on this occasion, Happy Christmas, and you've got 4 of those. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're going to frame your main piece. But then you've got some bonus pieces because we wanted to make up use of that extra fabric that you've got. So you've got 7 of these little squares that you can use as your bonus pieces. And of course, if you want to, you can utilise these ones as well. So it's entirely up to you. So first thing to do is to press your panel to get out all of those creases, and then what we're going to do is actually cut those pieces. A couple of different ways you can do this. If you are a new sewer, you might not have all your quilting paraphernalia yet, and that's okay. You can cut this out simply with your scissors if you want to. So all you do is follow the edges of the pieces. So cut on the outside edge, so you can cut using your scissors and cut out those pieces like so. Okay, nice and easy. Or you may prefer to cut with a rotary cutter, so you can. So bring in your cutting mat to protect your surface, obviously, and then use your rotary cutter to cut out your pieces instead. So come in with your quilt ruler, come in with your rotary cutter and cut along those edges that you've got instead, and cut it that way. Oops. If you prefer. So you can cut it that way if you want to. So it's either your rotary cutter or your scissors. You decide which. But all you need to do is cut out all those pieces. Not going to use the bonus pieces at the moment, so we'll cut out the main elements that are going to form that front of your Quillow. You're going to need to add in some additional fabric for the back. That's not included within the panel, and you'll also need to add in some wadding to give it that nice squishy feel. Right, I'm going to go and cut these pieces out then. So here we go. I've now cut out all my panels. So I've got my 2 large panels here. I've got my 4 side panels. I've got my cornerstones, and I've also got the little pieces that are left over. So these are going to be my guide, so as I know I've got everything in the right place. You've got the back there. You've also got your bonus pieces and your extra bonus pieces there that I use on other projects. And then you've got your instructions as well, with everything that you need to know on there. So I'm going to get started. First thing I'm going to do is take one of the large squares, and it's up to you, whichever you choose to be the front of your quilt, it's up to you. But if you do look at the instructions or the suggestions, you'll see that this one has actually got the one with the gift. So that's the one that I'm going to work with, the one with the gift. So the first thing the instruction tells you to do is to take one of these side panels and stitch it to the side of the right hand side of your square. Now do refer back, do keep referring back, because it will show you which way to have your Happy Christmas. So I tend to have it with the Happy Christmas that way out rather than that way, but it's up to you. So I would have that on the outside. One of the other pieces is going to sit on the opposite side, like so. So what we will do is we will put those right sides together. And that one right sides together. I will come in with my quilt clips. And I'm going to clip it down that long edge. So I'm just going to sew down that side and sew down that side using a 1/4 inch seam. So you should be able to see there that I've stitched a 1/4 inch. And what I'm going to do now is open that side piece out, like so. Open that side piece out, and I'm going to press that flat with that seam allowance going over to the blue. So pressing it like that so it's nice and flat. What you can do if you want to is actually press the seams open if you prefer. So on this project, I'm going to press those seams open. So all the way along there, opening those up and opening up those ones as well. So once you've got that pressed nice and flat, just straighten off any little kind of tail ends you've got in case any of those seams have shifted as you've gone, and just neaten it up. You shouldn't have too much of a shift though, so if it is a big shift, then yeah, just double check that you've got everything, but it should line up pretty much okay. So the next thing we're going to do is, and it's a good idea to do this on a big area, is get your next pieces. Now again, with these, it's up to you how you want to have them, but I'm going to have them in the same way, facing with the happy birthday out. So the top, that's the bottom. That is going to be your happy birthday at the top, like so. Not happy birthday, happy Christmas. So yeah, have them facing outwards. That's the wrong way around though. So just make sure that you have got them all the correct way, facing out. Okay, so these pieces here, we're going to attach our little corner pieces. So you can follow the pattern if you're wanting to. So you'll have 4 of these, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And again, if you want to follow the pattern, you can do. So on the pattern, you can see the one with the balloon is going to be up in that corner. The one with the little earmuffs is going to be up in that corner. The one with the antlers is going to be in this corner, which means the last one is going to be in this corner. So again, we're going to put those right sides together, and we're going to line up those edges, line up the top and bottom, and again clip those in place. And also this one, right sides together, lining it all up, and put your clips where you are going to sew, and that way you won't make any mistakes. So we're going to sew again 1/4 of an inch seam down that side and a 1/4 inch seam down that side. We're also going to do the same with that other piece, so let's bring that in. So again, these pieces are going to be right sides together, right sides together, and again I'm going to sew it down there. By all means, if you want, lay it out so you know it's exactly right before you sew everything. But I'm going to sew both of those. I'll be back in a moment. So there we go. So I've done exactly the same, stitched and pressed those seams open, and these pieces are now ready to be put in place. So the first one is going to go on the bottom edge, and again you can refer back to your instructions if you're wanting to, and that is going to sit right sides together. I'm going to clip that together. Now, when you're sewing seams together, when you're quilting, it's important for you to get those points working together. So you just line those up and put a little clip or pin in place. You do the same on the next one. And then, all being well, everything else will line up. Again, more clips will keep everything in place when you come to sew. So that means that when we sew this together and we pull that back, you can see how your frame is starting to form. Do that around the top as well, and again make sure you've got it the right way, flip it over and then clip those pieces in place. Again, make sure those corners line up. And the same on this side. Again, just make sure it's nice and flat and those clips go in place. And again, you can double check that that is going to be right. So we're going to have all of our little characters and our happy birthdays all lined up. So now I'm going to sew a 1/4 of an inch seam along there, 1/4 inch seam along there, and then open it out and give it a good press. So there you go. So you can see that we've created the quilt top and we've got all our cornerstones. So just as a little bit of an introduction to how a quilt is usually made, quite often you will have a panel. So on this occasion it would be a penguin. You would then add on a frame or a border to frame that design, and the side pieces that you've got are called sashing. Where the sashing meets at the corners, these are called cornerstones, and again can have a little bit of a frame around them. They're all phrases that you'll come across quite regularly when you're quilting. Now, I have already gone ahead and cut myself a piece of backing fabric to complement the front cover. I've also cut myself some wadding. Now in the instructions it does mention having your wadding 2 inches or so bigger than your quilt. I managed to make a mistake with that, but I don't want to waste my wadding, so I'm going to use it. Turn your quilt top over so right sides are facing the quilted fabric, the backing fabric. And then you would usually make sure that is smoothed out completely. Take your quilt top and again line it up and smooth it out. Smooth out from the centre to make sure that everything is nice and neat going out to the outer parameters. Let's turn that round so our penguin's the right way up. So this is now the back side of the quilt top. You've got your backing and you've got your wadding. And we're going to stitch through all 3 layers. Going to leave a gap at the bottom of about 8 inches. I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam round the parameter to meet up with the other side of that gap. Again, I would suggest that you use your quilt clips to keep everything in place. You might want to put some little markings or a couple of pins just to remind you that you need to stop sewing and start sewing at a certain point. So I've left my turning gap, I've stitched all the way around the edges, and now I'm going to turn it inside out. So I need to turn it inside out where you've got the fabrics facing each other. Put your hand in, grab one of the corners, can trim off the corners if you want to, but turn it through that gap. And just poke your finger into the corners as you go. Now we have a quilt with the backing and the wadding. This could be a quilt just as it is, but we're going to turn this into a quillow. First things first though, I'm going to give this a good press and make sure that I turn in that little raw edge that we've created at the bottom. Now this next stage is optional. It isn't detailed in the written instructions. Now this next stage is optional. It's not included in the instructions, and certainly if you are leaving your quilt as it is without adding the pocket, I would suggest you do this next stage. This is when we're going to stitch in the ditch. Stitching in the ditch means that you will stitch on the front of your quilt through the seams that you have created. You could also stitch along the pretend seams that were there on the printed panel, but that's entirely up to you. If you're going to quilt the layers together, it's always a good idea to start from the centre and work your way out. You put a pin in place to stitch through or keep all the layers together, and then keep pinning at regular intervals to make sure that that fabric doesn't move. I've chosen 2 threads. The light one I will use on the top, and the darker one I will use in my bobbin to complement the back. Take your quilt over to your sewing machine and get ready to sew. Make sure that your needle is sitting in the centre of the foot, and we're going to sew along the seam that you've already sewn. So the pieces between the main panel and the side pieces, as you can see. What you can also do, if you want to, is stitch the faux seams where the colour change in the print. This will give the illusion that you have sewn these pieces too. If you have the option to have your needle down when you stop sewing, then I would select this. Drop your needle into the fabric and sew along the seam. Roll up the right hand side of your quilt and take it gently and slowly, keeping on the sewn seam. You may have a stitch in the ditch foot with a guide to keep you on track, which of course you can use. So, all I've done is I've stitched where we have seams that we created. So we took the block, the original block, and added the side bits on. So I stitched there. Then we added the cornerstones and the centrepiece. So I've done the stitching there. So at the moment all I've done is stitched in the ditch for the seams that we created. So you can see that we've got them coming down and going across. So you can leave that as it is if you want to, or you can go on and do the further detail for the inside and where these fabrics meet here. I think I'm going to do that. So this is going to be the cushion panel, or the pocket. This is going to be the pocket, and you can see we've got the fabrics, so right sides together in the panel, and the fabric that I've got in the back of my Quillow, and then I've got my quilt wadding there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch around the edge. I'm going to put some pins in place this time rather than the quilt clips. Now I need to leave a gap, probably about 4 inches here, just so as I can turn it through at a later stage. So put it about there, whoops, and about there, something like that. And then I just put a few pins just dotted around just to keep it together. And then just copy at the top. There we go. So I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch in all the way around, leaving that gap at the bottom there. there we go, left a gap, gone all the way around. So again, I'm going to turn it inside out. So again, go between the two fabrics and then pull the corners through. Again, if you want, snip off the corners, just make sure you don't go through the thread on the corners, just to take away a bit of that bulk. And as they go between the fabrics into the corner and pull it through. There we go. Push out into the corners, push it into the corners. That corner too. There we go. And turn those bits in like so, because they'll get caught in when we stitch the pocket in place in a few moments. I'm just going to give that a quick press with the iron. There you go. You can, if you want to, quilt on the inside of that line again like we did before. You might even want to do a bit of free motion work around the penguin. So I'm going to stitch around there for that stitch in the ditch look, and also I'm going to top stitch across there to keep it nice and flat. So there we go. Now we need to do our construction. So we've got the panel that is going to be our cushion, and then we've got our quilt. So, first thing that you need to do is to have the back of the pocket and the back of the quilt facing upwards. Now everything is going to line up at this bottom edge, and the stitch line that you've got there and the stitch line that you've got there are going to be where the two come together. And you're going to catch these edges in at the same time. So there's quite a lot going on. So what you have to do is, first of all, clip everything together along the bottom edge. So that's going to come along the bottom edge. So the layers together at the bottom as well all need to come together, because you need to stitch those all together at the same time as well. So make sure all those ends are turned in and you've got it nice and tight with the clips. Like so. Down the edge here, I'm actually going to use some pins, because what we're going to do is we will stitch down the line that is already there. So we need to make sure that it catches this as it goes through. So just a few, making sure that that pulls over and goes over that line, like so. So we've taken a few minutes just to make sure that you're covering up that stitch line. And again over on this side. Make sure that edge is covering over that stitch line. Now you don't want to pull it too tight because you don't want to bunch everything up, but you also need to make sure that when you stitch through from the front, it is going to catch through all those layers, like so. Coming like so. I'll come in so like so. So we can see now that we're going to stitch down across the bottom and back up the side there. But what we're actually going to do is do it from this side. So you should be able to see where your top pin has come through on that side. And if you can't see it on this side, then just make sure it's going through all of those layers, so as you can see it. And it's actually that line between the blue and the green that we're going to be sewing. So we're going to go from there, from that point there, which you can put another pin in place if you want to, so you can see where it is. So from that point there, down to the bottom, across the bottom, and back up to that point that you've got there. And again, if you want to put an extra little pin in there, just so as you know exactly where you are stitching to, then you can. Okay, I'm going to go do that now. So there we go. One finished quilt. And when we flip it over, you've got your cushion pocket on the back. So how does it all come together? Well, you flip it over and you fold it in where the cushion comes to an end, the cover comes to an end, the pocket comes to an end, like so. Then you bring the top down, like so, and then you turn the whole thing through. So get your hand inside and pull it through, and just keep going. Push it into the corners. Push it into the corners. And pull it down. And there you go. You have a cushion that when you turn it inside out, becomes a quilt. And that's a Quillow.